if I can learn to tell the truth about my brokenness and then learn to smile and have compassion towards my own brokenness, now I'm mirroring Jesus.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
John Casey, it is so good to be with you. Thanks for being a part of this today.
You're welcome, Tim. Happy to be here.
Well, so we're talking about, you're going to be talking about radical honesty and grace. And those are two concepts that really have a lot of weight to them. I anticipate they're really rich with meaning. And so just basically from the start, John, what do you mean and what is the meaning when you talk about radical honesty and grace? What are you talking about when you say those words?
So I want to actually back up a minute, Tim. These words, radical honesty and grace, are part of the Crucible mission. And I think a word or two before sets this up.
Yep, that sounds great.
You know, we're in the Crucible, we're trying to ignite, we're trying to get something started in men and women. And what we're trying to ignite is Christ-like change. And how we're doing that is through experiences of radical honesty and grace. So that tees it up for me that to get real about honesty and grace, we can't just be talking about it. We have to find a way to experience it. And so we're after experiences of helping men and women be honest about themselves in a way that they know deep inside, but are afraid to say because they don't think they'll get a response of grace and love, which is what they long for. So we're trying to create experiences where men and women can tell the deepest truth about themselves that they know, and they're doubting anyone would love them if others knew it. So trying to set up a space where people can be that honest and get grace like they've never experienced before, because they are God's beautifully crafted men and women, no matter what they've done or thought. So that's what we're talking about. We're trying to create space where people can be honest with what they know is inside that they doubt others could accept, and then find that others do, which then creates a huge shift in their lives and potential for growth.
And do you think that's part of the problem, that we don't see honesty or radical honesty and grace going hand in hand, that it really is almost like polar opposites? They seem like opposite things, right? I can't be totally honest and have this grace, and I can't give grace if I'm totally honest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, inside we think they are polar opposites, that we fear that if I really told you what I was thinking and doing, I wouldn't be loved, and I need your love. And so that's the everyday thought, I think, is that I've got to guard what I say so that people will love and accept me, because we think these things don't go together. But our experience is that that's the only way we get the deepest love and grace, is by being totally honest and having people hold us anyway. So it is counter-cultural, and we may get to it, but I think there are a number of amazing biblical stories that confirm being radically honest is the way to the deepest grace that we all need and long for.
Yeah, talk about that more. What are some stories that come up for you that showcase that?
Well, one of my favorite ones is Peter. I mean, Jesus obviously loved Peter, and Jesus knew Peter. Peter was so excitable that he did goofy things that other people maybe wanted to do but didn't do, like stepping out of the boat and trying to walk on the water. And when things got to crunch time, Peter said, "No, I'm never going to deny you." But out of love, Jesus was warning him, "Yeah, that's coming," and he just couldn't imagine it. And so I think in a way, it made Peter's fall all the harder because Jesus knew it. Peter denied it. So he not only denied Jesus, but he denied that he would deny Jesus. So he's got a double deny going. And when he burst into tears, I bet he was believing there's no way Jesus could still love him. And then the end of that story is Jesus filling his nets again from the shore and inviting him into breakfast. Just to have breakfast together is an amazing experience of grace. And then, without a lot of words, he simply says, "I got a mission for you." "Oh, yeah, I know that in the past you denied, and I still have a mission for you." So Peter, my goodness, he failed miserably, as do I. And the response from the all-perfect Son of God was, "I can still use you, and I want to use you, and I'm committed to using you, so go." So, yeah, to me, that's an amazing story of just radical honesty and grace. And I'm sure Peter's believing he was useless to the kingdom after that, but not so. So that's my favorite story.
Yeah, no, it's a great story. And I love how Jesus tells him 3 times, "Go feed my sheep, he does 3 times what Peter did 3 times, right? In denying him.
Yeah.
So talk more about fear, John. We were talking before about fear and denying our fear. Just kind of talk about that and how it connects to the topic of honesty and grace. Because, you mentioned Peter had fear, but he still would do crazy things like stepping out on the water. What about this fear I have, but I deny it? And in a sense, is that like lying to myself too, that I'm not being honest with myself?
I think it's very easy for us as humans to live in a place of fear. And so I made a significant change. I resigned from my role as a hospital chaplain. I wasn't full-time. I was very part-time. But part of my reasoning in doing that was I came to the awareness that for me to keep on doing it at this point in my life, I was doing it out of fear. I was doing it. If I kept doing it, it'd be as much out of fear of, not having a paycheck, not having a badge that gave me credibility, not having the opportunities to be in a patient room where I can just make a huge difference and feel like I'm the savior. So
Sure.
there was a lot of fear of letting go of that. But in my journey with the Crucible, I've become more aware of my fear, and I've been able to step back and say, do I want to live in that fear, or do I want to push through the fear and live on the other side of it? And so on this topic of radical honesty and grace, I think the fear I keep hearing from men, and mostly because that's where I'm engaged, but I suspect it's similar for women, is that if you knew the truth about me, you wouldn't love and accept me. And I think that's the core fear. So what we do is we hide things about ourselves because we can't imagine that people would be gracious towards us if they knew that about us. So in that regard, I think many of us live in an everyday fear that I can't be myself because it wouldn't be acceptable to people around me. And then I think what I hear on our weekends and in groups is men and women, when they push through that fear and they tell that thing that if you knew this, you wouldn't love me, they tell it. And what they get back is this amazing grace, and it just creates an experience that is life-changing for them.
Yeah. Well, and that's amazing. And let's go back to that fear too. How is that fear born out? And let's say I do take I mean, isn't that through experience too, where I develop the fear, where I go, hey, this is who I am or what I'm thinking. And I mean, I can think of times when I've been in my younger days when I've disclosed things and people weren't very graceful or forgiving or whatnot. And so, I mean, isn't it through experience that I kind of develop that fear to begin with?
That's really true, Tim, and that's really the journey of what we're doing in the Crucible, is helping people to go back to some of those experiences when they were younger, when that fear pattern came online and they decided they had to protect themselves in a certain way, and thus they lived that out their whole lives. But yeah, I remember shortly after I began a personal relationship with Jesus, I went home and told my dad about that, and he just immediately started to make fun of me.
Hmm.
He began to, and half the time, frankly, he was drunk, but when drunk, that's when his true thought would come out, and he would mock me, calling me, "Oh, John the Baptist is here."
Hmm.
And so that created some fear for me about owning my faith in front of him. In fact, I don't think I ever talked about it again with him. So yeah, that was an experience where the man I needed to be proud of me was mocking me. So yes, I think, and we talked about it, that it's really hard for people to come back with a gracious response, because a lot of us are full of judgment about what's the right way and the wrong way. And when people do it the wrong way, or they do wrong, we got to come at them with judgment. So yeah, oftentimes we don't get a gracious response, and so we start to hide.
How do I create an atmosphere or an environment where I can have this honesty and grace, right? Where I can have this, be radically honest, this is who I am, and have this graceful acceptance of other people's radical honesty too.
Well, Tim, I think what we'd have to do is get you on a weekend and go over it again. But I think that, so I one of my long held beliefs about the Crucible, and it actually mirrors the church. In a church setting, I really want, and in a personal spiritual setting, I wanted to notice what are the good practices that if I keep doing them, they'll connect me closely with God. And in the church, what are the practices I can lead people in that'll help them commune with God? And what I see in the Crucible is there are certain practices we open up for people that if they begin to practice them, then they can regularly experience grace. But one of them is that in my own journey with Crucible, that I've had repeated experiences to the point where now I can start to give myself grace. And that's really important, that I could open myself up to, okay, I didn't do it perfectly. I may have flat out failed, but believing that Jesus is still gracious and being gracious to myself. That to me is the big practice that opens up my ability to be gracious towards others. And so,
well, you're talking about, the greatest commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with all your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. But then Jesus says, and love your neighbor as yourself, like almost like without even taking a breath, and how that's connected. I mean, is it really true? Do you feel like does the honesty and grace have connection with loving myself too? Loving, how can I love my neighbor if I really don't love myself? Or am I going to love my neighbor in the way that I love myself? So if I'm judgy and don't give myself grace, is that the way I'm going to treat my neighbor too, and kind of self-fulfill things?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've got this strong inner critic that just evaluates everything I do. And what, the plus side of that inner critic is it spurs me on to work harder and to do things better. But the truth is I'm never going to do it perfectly. And,
right.
I've, my journey as a pastor, I'd get up and give really good sermons. I mean, they were really good, but then I had trouble sleeping Sunday night because I thought about the fact that nobody else noticed this, but there was a sentence where I had subject and verb that didn't agree. And that's the kind of stuff I think about. Or in the midst of going 90 miles an hour in the sermon, I mispronounced a word. And that's the crazy stuff that I would think about. And it took me a while to just smile at my mistakes. And it took me a while to realize, oh, you know what? I learn better from my mistakes than I do from my successes. And then I remember my sister telling me, John, you do things so well, but it's your foibles that actually connect you with people.
Yeah, talk about that more. What does that mean?
So what I took her to mean was, if you're up there, John, just doing it pristinely, if you're giving a perfect sermon and a perfect teaching and there's just no flaws in it, it intimidates people. They can't connect with you because we're all flawed. I think that's what she meant, that John, your idiosyncrasies and your foibles, you're human, you're like us, and that connects.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, trying to do it. So it's the same pattern, Tim. When I'm working so hard to get it perfectly, I'm afraid of my flaws. I'm afraid of my mistakes because you're not going to love me if it's not perfect. That's that fear thing. I got to get it right. I got to get it perfect. And it's the same fear base that is behind my hiding a truth about me, wanting to hide every mistake, believing that then you'll love me. And that's not really the way it works. Peter didn't get any greater love from Jesus after his denial, didn't get any less. And so as I could slowly believe that and give myself grace, then I can be more gracious with others when they tell me a truth about them that they're scared to tell me.
So it's both and. It's being able to give honesty and grace to others and to myself too is vitally important. That's
and I would actually turn those around. I'm not going to be very gracious with others until I can start to let some grace drip into my heart and soul.
Yeah.
So
you talk about the church and touched on as a pastor and having, congregants or people in the, listening to your sermon when you're more authentic and they're kind of given that sigh of, oh, he's like us. I can just see that. Oh, okay. We, in my experience of growing up in church too, really this whole thing of truth and grace as being this, both and concept. I just kind of remember one or the other, right? I remember talking about grace, but then the truth part seemed to be separate from grace. And so, I mean, why, what have you experienced insights into the church why we have a hard time holding both?
I mean, I don't know if I have insights, but I certainly am aware that in the church, we tend to hold one or the other. It's really hard to hold both. So, my experience is typically more conservative churches. We hold on to the truth of the law and the commandments and the instructions of God. And we kind of hold that up to people and hold that up to ourselves. And we're not so gracious when we don't live up to the standard of God's teaching. Or it tends to be, my experience is that more liberal churches, they're less strident about the commandments and the teachings of Jesus, and they're more focused on the grace side. And they can be more gracious because they're not as anxious about doing right and wrong. So I don't know that I have an answer, Tim, but I just noticed that it's truth. And yet, in the Crucible, our model is Jesus, who walked the earth and teaches us how to be a godly human being. And he was brutal with the truth, but also full of grace when people were honest about their own failings. So he held both. So he tells Peter, you're going to blow it. You're going to deny me. And then he's right there with grace when it happens. I can't pull it out, but I know there was a part of him that was shaking his head at Thomas, that Thomas had to actually see Jesus. But then in grace, Jesus makes a special appointment for Thomas to be able to get to see him and touch him. So Jesus is the beautiful, perfect balance of both. And it goes back to what we were talking about before. If I can learn to tell the truth about my brokenness and then learn to smile and have compassion towards my own brokenness, now I'm mirroring Jesus. And so practicing holding both is, and frankly, I think that's one of the things we do on our weekends is we hold both. We try to create safety for men and women to tell the truth you're hiding and find that you're going to get loved here even with that truth. And so it's that thing about ongoing experiences, which then helped me to start to practice it the way Jesus did, where, that is true, that I don't make clean agreements because I'm afraid to disappoint people, and then still smile with grace at myself, at my failures.
So the more I experience or go through these good experiences of holding both this of radical honesty and grace, the more I'm going to start to see the value that I can enter into and sit in both. And so it sounds like in some ways that's kind of a myth, right? This, you can't have truth or honesty and grace or vice versa. Is there anything else, any other myths that we've created out of those two concepts that are just incorrect, just
Well, and I'm not sure this is, I don't know if this is a myth on the other side, but the myth that most of us walk around is that believing if I told the truth, you wouldn't be gracious. And it's actually the opposite, that when we tell the truth, there is a lightening that happens, a lightening of the load. And in the right context, there will be grace for us. And then we start to build up this experience that I can tell the truth. So I'm thinking of a man in one of the groups I'm leading right now who, in the space of our group, he admitted he's had some trouble with pornography. He's done better with it for a while, but all of a sudden he's kind of struggling again. And what was interesting is he said, I'm not going to make a commitment that I'm going to stop looking at pornography because I just don't think that, I'm not trusting myself on it. I will make the commitment that I'll check in with you next week. And then someone in the group kind of pushed him, well, does your wife know about this? No, she doesn't. Does she typically? Well, I used to tell her, but I'm afraid to tell her now. So it's the same thing. He's afraid to tell her because he's afraid it'll damage their connection. And he came back to the group the next week and said, he told her. He told her in a safe place where there was actually support for both of them. And he said, it actually connected us. We're more connected than we've been in a while. And I thought, wow, that's an experience where he was radically honest about what's going on right now, and he got grace back. And it wasn't what he expected. And the other interesting piece is he let us know, he actually didn't look at pornography the rest of that week. And I think it's because he pushed through the fear, told us what was going on, was honest with us, didn't make promises he really wasn't ready to make, took the courage to tell his wife, got grace. And I just think all of that filled his soul in a way that gave him power to let go of pornography because he was connected with God, with our group, in an authentic way that gave him safety and gave him the ability to make some changes he actually wanted to make.
That's amazing. And that speaks to the power of this. Again, though, I can see it's hard to get started, right? It's hard to start on this journey. So what would you say, what would be some advice for someone that's like, boy, that sounds really good, but man, that's really scary. And how can somebody put this into practice even before they go to a Crucible Weekend?
Well, I do think safety is important, Tim. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the reasons I think our weekends work. We take men and women on a journey where bit by bit by bit, where we challenge them, but they also sense that it's safe and that we're going to love them no matter what comes out with them.
Mm.
And so we create a safe space so that at a certain point in the weekend, the men and women can tell that truth that they've been afraid to tell anyone, and then they get grace back. So that begins the journey. So this man in my group that I was telling you about, I really believe that it was, I didn't tell him this, I didn't advise this, I didn't push him. I really believe that for him to bring his wife in on a struggle is the best thing to do, because it'll free him, because he's walking around carrying this load of shame. And I think telling us men in that circle was a great start. And then telling his wife is a good thing, but it has to be done safely. Otherwise, it's going to backfire the way you mentioned earlier in the conversation. You said, isn't it our past experiences where it didn't go well that have created this fear? And I think you're exactly right. So we have to create safety. So understandably, it's pretty hard for a spouse to hear that her husband is looking at images of women, because it just takes a woman very often to a place of sadness and anger and fear, and it doesn't go well. Well, this man, we didn't talk about how to do this, but he actually shared that in a counseling session. And that was a safe place, because the neutral person with lots of wisdom loved both of them and could help them make it safe to hear it. So I do think safety is important. So if I'm new to this work and I'm hearing this podcast and I want to go try telling that truth, then what I would say is follow your gut and make sure you go share with somebody that, boy, your gut's telling you it'll be safe. You've got indications from the past that this person's going to be able to hold your story and still love you and give you grace. And if you choose somebody and it doesn't go so well, don't give up.
Yeah.
Think about someone else. And you know what? Maybe you start out in a professional relationship. Maybe you tell a therapist about this thing first. Someone who's trained to be there and stay connected and hear and appreciate the bigger journey and be in that place of not being shocked and not being anxious. So yeah, I guess my advice is see if you can go at it in the safest way possible, where you begin to have experiences of telling the truth and getting grace back. And so I think most men and women who have been on a Crucible Weekend are on a journey of being gracious to themselves and are more poised to be gracious to a friend who's coming to tell something hard and difficult. So I think that's not a bad place to start. I think that has better percentages than other places. And I'm sorry to say, I'm not so sure spiritual leaders are the best place to go, because often spiritual leaders who are leading a flock, they've got risk factors and they get really anxious. And so they're often not in the best place to be in that place of grace. They don't want to downplay it in a way that they believe sets up bad behavior. So it's just, so what I'm saying there is I think we have to be careful to create the right person who can really hear us and receive us with grace. So that woman that poured the perfume on Jesus and cried, and the host thought, Jesus, surely if you knew what this woman was up to in her everyday life, you wouldn't tolerate this. Well, he knew everything about it. And he wasn't repulsed by her. He was actually gracious and welcoming to her. And honestly, we haven't talked about this, Tim, but the thing that helps us let go of bad behavior and sin is actually grace. It's not a stern response of, well, you shouldn't have done that. What were you thinking? That kind of takes us to shame. But a Jesus-like response of, yeah, I know who this woman is. She is a beautiful woman created by my Father in heaven. and she's been sinned against likely, and she's fallen into sin. And I'm going to help her out by graciously receiving her.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. I think Jesus models that, and it just drops our defenses, right?
Yeah.
When I experience that, it drops my defenses, and I can go, he's one of us, right?
Yeah. But it took me a long time to get there, Tim, because in my perfectionism, which was hiding every mistake so that you'll love me, the parts of scripture that I grabbed onto were things like, you must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Well, the scriptures actually say that.
Yeah.
But my MO was drive myself to do it better and better so I'll be accepted and loved. And I read the scriptures in a way that supported that. And that leads me to hide the truth, that I'm scared to death to make a mistake, that I won't be lovable, when in fact, Jesus is welcoming me in all of my mistakes and sin and brokenness. And so it's a shift to start to begin to think that the Father and Jesus are in a gracious place towards me. So my heart and mind can start to notice those other passages, like Jesus graciously receiving that woman with the perfume and graciously engaging the woman at the well, because she was a God-crafted, beautiful human being who was trying to find love. So, just opening a little bit to that grace, we start to bring moisture to that hardened soil, and it just takes time to begin to buy into another myth that is a true myth, which is telling the truth is the best way to freedom and grace.
Yeah. Well, I can see the delight in your smile and your eyes as you talk about that. Another thing we talked about before, and we may put it earlier in this recording, but you mentioned that you really got a lot out of David's life too, and just the way that the story that's told about David. What are your thoughts about him as a character and scripture, and how it relates to the radical honesty and grace?
I love the Psalms, and David was such an amazing man. He was this great warrior, an amazing leader, but he was also a writer of Psalms. I mean, he was a rich man in terms of living a whole life. And so Psalm 32 is one of my favorites because I love the graphic way. This is after David had been connected to Bathsheba in a way that was basically stealing another man's wife, and leading to really awful sin where he had the husband Uriah murdered, and the way he set up the battle. And so then along comes Psalm 32, and what he says in Psalm 32 is, he said, my body was wasting away. My body was just groaning day after day. And what he meant, I think, was he was just dying under the burden of what he had done and keeping it inside. And then you hear this shift in the psalm where he says, but then I confess my sin to you. Then I told you what I had done. Well, God already knew it, but he was waiting on David to be honest about it. And so he's honest about it. And then he describes in lovely terms how, everything in his body changed. He felt this freedom and aliveness that was missing before. So to me, that just continues to underscore that in our brokenness, we think hiding is the way to love and grace, all the way back to Adam and Eve. They thought hiding was the way to be safe. And that's what David thought, was just keep it to yourself. But then he found that when he opened it up, he felt this freedom and forgiveness and aliveness. So yes, I think David, the ancient leader David, is underscoring this modern truth that being honest in the right context, and God's always the right context, we will start to take in grace, and that will give us energy to live differently, actually.
Yeah, and even the context that you're talking about in the body, right? If I'm weighed down by these things that I don't tell anybody, I've noticed when people release that, right? When they speak those things to people in a safe environment, there is almost a physical weight, it looks like, that's lifted from them. I mean, it's really quite amazing. Have you noticed that kind of stuff too?
Yes, but the whole experience is sharing it and receiving grace back.
Oh, yes.
If they receive, what were you thinking?
Oh, right.
That just compounds the shame. But yes, it's the combination, which takes us right back to the beginning of this conversation. It's the combination of radical honesty and grace that just loosens things in our lives to live differently, I think. So yes, another way I see it, Tim, is in the groups that I lead, we try to help men be honest about their commitments. And I think the big shift for men is when they notice they haven't kept an agreement, is the biggest thing they realize is how weighed down they are, how they lose energy once they realize, oh, I didn't call my daughter the way I said I was going to. And then it just starts to weigh on them until they are honest about their failure to keep a commitment, and they're looking at the truth. Why did I not keep it? Oh, I noticed I honestly never really wanted to, but I did it to make somebody happy. And again, it's back to honesty and grace. Yes, when we don't tell the truth or keep the truth or do what we say, we get weighed down. We lose energy physically, the way David did.
Wow. So is there, man, John, you've given us so much to chew on and think about and really put into practice too. Is there anything else about this concept of radical honesty and grace that you want to make sure that our listeners really understand or really, take in before we're done?
So the whole idea of practices is really big to me. It's just, and I'm learning all the time new practices. During Sunday listening to the sermon, I wasn't listening real closely, I confess. But what I was trying to, I was jotting notes, not about the sermon, but how do I develop a practice that'll help me let go of thinking I'm right all the time? Because thinking I'm right all the time just exacerbates this critical voice in me. So how can I let go of being right? So I want to think about a practice for doing that. And a lot of what we've been talking about for me in the end comes down to getting some initial experiences of telling somebody the truth where it's safe, and I get grace in return, which then begins to give me confidence that telling the truth is the right way to live my life. And along the way, starting to develop a practice of giving myself grace, so that the day comes, and it will, where I tell somebody the truth about me and they jump all over me with shame and guilt. I can still keep my head up because I know that God and I together have given myself grace for that truth about me. So, and I think that's so, the practices are key, but at core is getting to a place in my life where I can tell the truth about me, and I am confident that God holds me with grace, and I can join God in holding me in grace, and that I can just continually be in that place. Then I have courage to go live and tell the truth, knowing that if the person doesn't give me grace, well, that's probably about them and not about me. So.
Wow. That's such solid counsel, solid truth. Thank you so much for spending time, John, and just sharing your heart out of not just your head, but your heart, and talking about entering into this experiential way of living with honesty and grace. Thank you so much for your time, and just appreciate you a lot. So,
thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
I enjoyed doing this.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.